your cost of goods sold to grow marijuana or to buy it should be about a third. So you have a very good gross profit. So what that boils down to is you should be able to grow a pound for about $1,000, and if you're getting $10 a gram for your cannabis, that's $4,500 a pound. So these margins are not out of the ordinary, but you gotta be very efficient. And that's what we at our firm do. We consult with them how to set up their retail so that their selling floor is as small as possible. We try to get them to introduce other lines of business like hats and t-shirts and hemp clothing. The important point, if your local zoning allows. Sometimes states or cities will say, you cannot have any non-cannabis products in your dispensary, only cannabis. So you have to really watch your local sales and use tax too. That can really bite you. But I want to get through this before my time is over, and then I will turn over to questions. So what's going to happen here is they're going to pay tax 40% on $6.5 million. So that's $2.6 million. They've kept their overhead down, very lean operation. This is a real life story from my files they've opened. So look at this. Even with 280E and even with after taxes, they're turning 33% to the bottom line after taxes. It can be done, but you have to be very efficient. This has been more difficult in Colorado because there's been more competitive pressure. We have an abundance of people growing in Colorado. They went with a market-based approach. So if you today went down to our Department of Revenue with an application filled out with your fee for the license and a clean record, to this day you can still get a cannabis grow license. Why you would want to do that, I don't know, because we've seen the price of pounds go from $2,000 to $1,000 because of oversupply. But they're doing a market-based method, so we have a total of 1,700 licenses in Colorado. About 1,200 are active. Now that includes retail, grow, and extraction. Anyway, here's another one. These folks are not efficient. And they can't get their grow going the way they wanted to, so they have a much lower margin, right here, only 35%, and they're very inefficient here at $3 million of overhead. So they made $500,000 before taxes. But they get to pay tax on this number, say 40%, that's $1.4 million. So they got to make $500,000, and after taxes, they're in the whole $900,000. When people say to me, how can you be in excess of 100% tax bracket? That's how, and it happens more than you might think. If you're in early stage development, if you were in any other industry, you might have a tax loss of say $200,000 for a round number, and then you have say $500,000 of retail overhead expense you can't deduct. So you lost $200,000, but now we have to add back $300,000 of non-deductible expenses. So in the $500,000 of non-deductible expenses. So in the year you lost $200,000, you're going to pay tax on $300,000. It's very devastating. It needs to be fixed. We don't think it's constitutional, but we really, to tell you the truth, have not gotten anywhere in the courts, and I'd be surprised if we do. It really has to be fixed either by rescheduling. It has to, for 2E not to take effect, it has to be rescheduled below Schedule 2 to Schedule 3 or lower, or Congress needs to add a few sentences, and there's bills in Congress to do that. So I'm probably going to turn it over to questions. Let me just see what else I have here. Form of entity. Consider your form of entity, whether you're a corporation or a partnership. Consider that very carefully. I like corporations because if there's an IRS audit, and by the way, the IRS does target this industry, how else can you explain 25% of the dispensaries in Colorado being under audit when they're only 5 years old? And it just came out in the papers that the IRS is using it. Like most states, you're going to signal me? 2 minutes, okay. I'm going to turn it over to questions, but the point I was making is most states, the license holders are public information. If I have that list, because we've downloaded to make sure our clients have all their licenses in place, if I have that list, I bet the IRS does too. So how you form your entity is very important. I like corporations because if there's an audit, it doesn't affect all the partners like a limited partnership. And there's valuation issues, we do valuations, we can help you fine-tune your cash flow forecast, factor in 280E, help you design your layouts and your expenses. And the last point is then, what kind of return of investment are your investors going to expect? I don't know, this was just in the papers. The IRS is trawling the data, looking for people to audit. That just came out a few weeks ago. And then the rest of these that are in there, they're just things for you to refer to. So with that, how about some questions? Stuart?
Yeah. So, went from, I was going to ask the question, what if the entity is incorporated? And you have basically have officers' compensation. Now the officer may be working in production, but largely the officer's capacity is usually administrative. How does 280E impact the deduction for officer compensation?
You are absolutely correct. If they work in the grow or extraction, then their wages are deductible. If they're working in administration or retail, they are not, which is it's a little beyond the scope of this seminar. But that's why I don't like S corps, because you have to have a reasonable salary like W-2, and then you have, that W-2 may not be deductible here, but it's income over here.
So, effectively, what if the officer's compensation is not deductible, and the officer might not be paid compensation in the C corp, and receive,
or at least a lower.
Receive dividends instead.
Yeah, take a dividend at 15%.
The LLC
there's a lot of
is not an option as far as you're concerned.
Oh well, see, limited liability companies, we get this all the time. What type of entity are you? Is one of the first questions we ask. I'm a limited liability company. Well, a limited liability company on its first tax return can elect to be a corporation, an S corporation, or a partnership. So form of entity is a big issue. We spend a lot of time on form of entity. The most important takeaway from this is if you grow and sell cannabis, that's all you should do. Just grow and sell cannabis. Have another entity, try to get a revenue stream for a separate entity. That's where you can do your travel and entertainment, come into seminars like that. Put that under a separate entity. Maybe it's a leasing company, maybe it's a real estate company, maybe it's intellectual property. But isolate the growing and selling of marijuana so that you can be in that first corner and be making a 20 to 30% after-tax return on sales versus making $500,000 and owing the IRS $1.4 million. Anybody else? For the last seminar of the day, I thank you all for coming.